Unit 6, JavaScript. JavaScript is a popular programming language used primarily for creating dynamic websites and web applications. Here are the key points about JavaScript. JavaScript is a lightweight, interpreted, and just-in-time compiled programming language with first-class functions. It is most well known as the scripting language for web pages, but is also used in many non-browser environments like Node.js, Apache CouchDB, and Adobe Acrobat. JavaScript is a prototype-based, multi-paradigm, single-threaded, dynamic language supporting object-oriented, imperative, and declarative programming styles. It is one of the three core technologies of World Wide Web, along with HTML and CSS. JavaScript is easy to learn and has a simple syntax. It is used to add interactivity, animations, and dynamic effects to web pages. JavaScript is an interpreted language that executes code line by line, providing more flexibility. It has a vibrant community and is constantly evolving with new features and standards. JavaScript is supported by all modern web browsers and is a must-learn language for web developers. The standards for JavaScript are the ECMA Script Language Specification, ECMA 262, and the ECMA Script Internationalization API Specification, ECMA 402. ECMA Script, European Computer Manufacturers Association Script, is a scripting language based on JavaScript. Invented by Brendan Eich at Netscape, ECMA Script made its first appearance in the Navigator. Client-side scripting. Client-side scripting is a technique used in web development where scripts are executed by the user's web browser instead of the web server. The script code is sent to the client along with the HTML web page and runs directly on the user's machine. The main benefits of client-side scripting include faster response times and more interactive applications. Reduced server load since data processing happens on the client. Ability to validate user input before sending it to the server. Allows for mathematical calculations and complex tasks to be performed quickly. However, client-side scripting also has some drawbacks. The source code is visible to the user and cannot be hidden. It cannot access databases or send sensitive data securely over the internet. Relies on the client's browser being compatible and having JavaScript enabled. Debugging and maintaining complex client-side code can be challenging. The most popular client-side scripting language is JavaScript, which is used to create dynamic and responsive web pages and websites. jQuery is another commonly used JavaScript framework. Some key applications of client-side scripting include creating interactive user interface elements like pull-down menus and animation. Validating user input before submission to catch errors early. Detecting installed browser plugins and notifying the user. Customizing web pages without reloading, such as in online games. In summary, client-side scripting is a powerful technique for enhancing web applications with interactivity and responsiveness, but it has limitations around security, compatibility, and complexity. It is often used in conjunction with server-side scripting to create full-featured web experiences. Introduction to JavaScript. What is JavaScript? JavaScript is a lightweight, cross-platform, single-threaded, and interpreted compiled programming language. It is primarily used for adding interactivity and dynamic behavior to web pages. JavaScript can be used for both client-side and server-side development. Some key features of JavaScript include weakly typed language, dynamically typed, imperative and declarative programming paradigms, standard library of objects like array, date, math, ability to manipulate the document object model, DOM, to change HTML content, attributes, styles, and visibility. History and evolution. JavaScript was created in 1995 by Brendan Eich while he was an engineer at Netscape. It was originally named LiveScript but was renamed to JavaScript on the popularity of Java at the time. Over the years, JavaScript has evolved significantly. Key milestones include 1997, JavaScript became an ECMA standard, ECMA script. 2009, Node.js brought JavaScript to the server side. 2015, ECMA Script 6, ES6, introduced many powerful features. Applications. JavaScript has a wide range of applications today. Web development, adding interactivity and dynamic behavior to websites. Web applications, building robust web apps with technologies like AngularJS, React.js, Vue.js. Server applications, using Node.js for server-side development. Game development, creating games for the web with HTML5 and JavaScript libraries. Mobile development, building mobile apps with technologies like React Native. To get started with JavaScript, all one need is a modern web browser. The JavaScript console in your browser's developer tools is a great way to experiment with the language. Data types. JavaScript has 8 data types. 1. String represents textual data, such as hello or JavaScript. Strings are immutable, meaning they cannot be changed once created. 2. Number represents both integers and floating point numbers. JavaScript numbers are always stored as double precision 64-bit floating point numbers. 3. Big int, a numeric data type that can represent integers in the arbitrary precision format. It is useful for representing integers larger than the number type can accurately represent. 4. Boolean represents a logical entity and can have two values, true or false. 5. Undefined, a variable that has been declared but has not been assigned a value, or not declared at all, has the value undefined. 6. Null represents the intentional absence of any object value. It is one of the primitive values of JavaScript. 7. Symbol represents a unique and immutable identifier. Symbols are useful as object property keys. 8. Object, the most important data type. It is a collection of key-value pairs and can hold complex data structures. These data types can be divided into two categories. 1. Primitive data types: string, number, big int, boolean, undefined, null, and symbol. 2. Non-primitive data types: object. The type of operator can be used to determine the data type of a variable. Variables. Declaring JavaScript variables. 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 Declaring JavaScript variables. To declare a variable in JavaScript, you can use one of three keywords. var. This was the original way to declare variables in JavaScript. It is function scoped, meaning the variable is accessible within the function it is defined in or globally if defined outside a function. It should only be used for older browsers. Let introduced in ES6. Let is block scoped, meaning the variable is accessible within the block denoted by curly braces it is defined in. It allows reassigning values. Const, also introduced in ES6. Const is used to declare variables that cannot be reassigned. Like let, it is block scoped. The value of a const variable must be assigned when it is declared. Here are some examples. Var x is equal to 5, function scoped. Let y is equal to 6, block scoped, can be reassigned. Const pi is equal to 3.14159, block scoped, cannot be reassigned. Naming variables. Variable names in JavaScript must follow these rules. They are case sensitive. MyVar and MyVar are different variables. They must begin with a letter, underscore, or $. They can contain letters, digits, underscores, and $signs. They cannot be a reserved keyword, like var or function. Using variables. Once declared, variables can be used to store and retrieve values. In this example, the variables price, quantity, and total are used to perform a calculation and display the result. Variables can hold different data types like numbers, strings, booleans, arrays, objects, and more. Their type is determined at runtime and can change. Scope and hosting. The scope of a variable refers to where it is accessible in the code. Variables declared with var are function scoped, while let and const are block scoped. JavaScript also has a concept called hosting, where variable and function declarations are moved to the top of their scope before code execution. This means variables declared with var can be accessed before they are declared in the code, but will have a value of undefined. In summary, variables are fundamental building blocks in JavaScript that allow storing and manipulating data. Proper use of variables, following naming conventions, and understanding scope are key to writing effective JavaScript code. Operators. JavaScript operators are symbols used to perform various operations on operands. There are several types of operators in JavaScript. Arithmetic operators. Arithmetic operators are used to perform mathematical operations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulus, and exponentiation. Examples include plus, percent, etc. Assignment operators. Assignment operators are used to assign values to variables. The most common assignment operator is equal to, but there are also compound assignment operators like plus, is equal to, etc. Comparison operators. Comparison operators are used to compare two values and return a Boolean result, true or false. Examples include is equal to, etc. Logical operators. Logical operators are used to combine multiple conditions. The most common ones are and, vertical bar, or, and not. String operators. The plus operator can be used to concatenate strings, and the plus is equal to operator can be used as a shorthand for string concatenation. Other operators. JavaScript also has bitwise operators, ternary operators, comma operators, unary operators, and relational operators for more specialized use cases. In summary, JavaScript operators provide the means to manipulate data, make comparisons, and control program flow. Understanding how to use these operators effectively is essential for writing functional and efficient JavaScript code. Functions. Defining functions in JavaScript. There are two main ways to define functions in JavaScript. 1. Function declaration. Function declarations start with the function keyword, followed by the function name, a parameter list enclosed in parentheses, and the function body enclosed in curly braces. 2. Function expression. Function expressions assign an anonymous function to a variable. The function can have a name, but it's optional. Invoking functions. Functions are executed when they are called or invoked. There are several ways to invoke functions in JavaScript. Function invocation, function name, arguments. Method invocation, object name dot method name, arguments. Constructor invocation, new function name, arguments. Indirect invocation, function name dot call, this value, arg1, arg2, or function name dot apply, this value. Functions as objects. In JavaScript, functions are first-class objects. This means they can have properties and methods, and they can be passed as arguments to other functions. Some key points about functions as objects. The type of operator returns function for functions. Functions have properties like length, number of parameters, and methods like toString. A function defined as a property of an object is called a method. Closures. A closure is a function that has access to variables from an outer function, even after the outer function has finished executing. Closures are created every time a function is created at function creation time. Arrow functions. Arrow functions, introduced in ES6, provide a more concise syntax for writing functions. Arrow functions automatically return the result if the body is a single expression. ES6 stands for ECMA Script 6. ECMA Script was created to standardize JavaScript, and ES6 is the sixth version of ECMA Script. It was published in 2015 and is also known as ECMA Script 2015. The full form of ECMA is European Computer Manufacturers Association. ECMA Script is a standard for scripting languages such as JavaScript, JScript, etc. It is a trademark scripting language specification. JavaScript is a language based on ECMA Script. In summary, functions are fundamental building blocks in JavaScript that allow for code reuse, modularity, and abstraction. Understanding how to define, invoke, and work with functions is crucial for writing effective JavaScript code. Conditional statements, loops, and repetition. Here is an overview of JavaScript conditional statements, loops, and repetition. Conditional statements. Conditional statements allow you to execute different actions based on different conditions. The main conditional statements in JavaScript are: 1. If-else statement. The if-else statement executes a block of code if a specified condition is true. If the condition is false, another block of code can be executed. If condition, block of code to be executed if the condition is true, else, block of code to be executed if the condition is false. 2. Switch statement. The switch statement is used to perform different actions based on different conditions. It evaluates an expression and executes the associated block of code, case, based on the value of the expression. Switch expression, case value 1, block of code, break, case value 2, block of code, break, or default, block of code. Loops. Loops are used to execute a block of code repeatedly until a certain condition is met. The main loop statements in JavaScript are: 1. For loop. The for loop is used to execute a block of code a specific number of times. It is often used when the number of iterations is known in advance. For initialization, condition, increment, block of code to be executed. 2. While loop. The while loop is used to execute a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. It is often used when the number of iterations is not known in advance. While condition, block of code to be executed. 3. Do while loop. The do while loop is similar to the while loop, but it executes the block of code at least once, regardless of whether the condition is true or false. Do block of code to be executed, then while condition. 4. For in loop. The for in loop is used to iterate over the properties of an object. For variable in object block of code to be executed. 5. For of loop. The for of loop is used to iterate over the values of an iterable object such as an array. For variable of iterable block of code to be executed. Repetition. Repetition in JavaScript can be achieved using loops or recursive functions. Recursive functions are functions that call themselves to solve a problem by breaking it down into smaller subproblems. Function recursive function parameter if base case return a value else recursive call with a different parameter. In summary, conditional statements allow you to execute different actions based on different conditions. While loops are used to execute a block of code repeatedly until a certain condition is met. Repetition can also be achieved using recursive functions. Advanced script. Here is a concise overview of some advanced JavaScript concepts. Closures. A closure is a function that has access to variables from an outer function, even after the outer function has finished executing. Closures are useful for creating private variables and methods, and for creating functions that remember state between function calls. Prototypes. In JavaScript, every object has a prototype, which is another object. When you try to access a property or method on an object, JavaScript first looks at the object itself, and then at its prototype, and then at the prototype's prototype, and so on, until it finds the property or method or reaches the end of the prototype chain. Prototypes are used to implement inheritance in JavaScript. Promises. Promises are a way to handle asynchronous code in JavaScript. A promise represents the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation and its resulting value. Promises provide a cleaner syntax for working with asynchronous code compared to using callbacks. Async await. Async await is a syntactical sugar on top of promises. It allows you to write asynchronous code that looks and behaves more like synchronous code. The async keyword is used to declare an asynchronous function, and the await keyword is used to pause the execution of an asynchronous function until a promise is resolved. ES6 features. ES6 ECMAScript 2015 introduced many new features to JavaScript, including arrow functions, classes, modules, let and const, template literals, and more. These features make JavaScript more concise, readable, and modular. Modules. Modules allow you to encapsulate code and make it reusable across different parts of your application. ES6 introduced native support for modules in JavaScript, allowing you to export and import functions, objects, and variables between files. By mastering these advanced concepts, one can write more efficient, modular, and maintainable JavaScript code and create more complex and interactive web applications. JavaScript and objects. JavaScript objects are a fundamental concept in the language. Here are the key points about JavaScript objects. Creating objects. There are several ways to create objects in JavaScript. Object literal notation, using curly braces and defining key-value pairs. Example of object literal notation, using curly braces and defining key-value pairs. Using the new keyword with object. Example of using the new keyword with object. Using an object constructor function. Example of using an object constructor function. Properties and methods. Objects consist of properties, key-value pairs, and methods, functions stored as properties. Properties can be accessed using dot notation, object.property, or bracket notation object. Methods are functions stored as properties and can access and manipulate the object's properties. Modifying objects. New properties can be added dynamically to an existing object. Existing properties can be modified by assigning a new value. Properties can be deleted using the delete operator. Objects are reference types. Objects are reference types, meaning variables hold a reference to the object in memory, not the object itself. When an object is assigned to a variable, the variable holds a reference to the object's location in memory. Built-in objects. JavaScript has several built-in objects like math, date, array, etc. that provide useful properties and methods. In summary, objects in JavaScript are collections of key-value pairs that can store data and functions. They are a fundamental part of the language and are used extensively in modern JavaScript programming. The DOM and web browser environments. The Document Object Model, DOM, is a programming interface that allows web browsers to access and manipulate the content, structure, and style of web pages. It represents the HTML document as a tree-like structure of objects that can be accessed and modified using JavaScript. Here are the key points about the DOM and web browser environments. The DOM is a standard. The DOM is a W3C, World Wide Web Consortium, standard that defines a platform and language-neutral interface for accessing and updating documents. It ensures cross-browser compatibility by providing a standardized way to interact with page elements. The DOM is not part of JavaScript. While the DOM is commonly used with JavaScript, it is not a part of the JavaScript language itself. JavaScript uses the DOM to access and manipulate web pages, but it can also be used in other contexts like Node.js that do not include the DOM API. The DOM represents the HTML document as a tree. When an HTML document is loaded in a web browser, The browser creates a DOM representation of the page. The DOM organizes the HTML elements into a tree-like structure, where each element is a node in the tree. The DOM allows dynamic updates. The DOM enables JavaScript to dynamically access and update the content, structure, and style of web pages. This allows for creating interactive and responsive web experiences, such as updating content without reloading the entire page or responding to user actions instantly. The DOM provides a programming interface. The DOM defines a set of objects, properties, and methods that represent the HTML document. This programming interface allows JavaScript to interact with the web page, such as changing the text of an element, adding or removing elements, or modifying the styles. In summary, the DOM is a crucial component that bridges the gap between web browsers and programming languages like JavaScript, enabling dynamic manipulation of web pages and creating interactive user experiences. The web browser environment consists of several key components that allow JavaScript to interact with the browser and web pages. Document Object Model (DOM). The Document Object Model (DOM) represents the structure of a web page, allowing JavaScript to manipulate its content, structure, and styling. The DOM is a tree-like representation of the HTML document that JavaScript can access and modify. Browser Object Model (BOM). The Browser Object Model (BOM) provides additional objects and functions for interacting with the browser itself, beyond just the web page. Key BOM objects include: Window represents the browser window and provides methods to control it. Navigator provides information about the browser and operating system. Location allows reading the current URL and redirecting the browser. Host environment. The JavaScript language itself is defined by the ECMAScript specification, but a host environment like a web browser provides additional platform-specific functionality. The host environment provides its own objects and functions in addition to the core JavaScript language. So, in summary, when JavaScript runs in a web browser, it has access to the DOM for manipulating web pages, the BOM for interacting with the browser, and is running within the overall host environment provided by the browser. This allows JavaScript to create dynamic, interactive web experiences. Forms and validations. JavaScript form validation. JavaScript form validation is the process of ensuring that user input is clean, correct, and useful before it is submitted to the server. It helps to improve data integrity and enhance the user experience by providing immediate feedback on invalid inputs. Here are the key points about JavaScript form validation. 1. Validation can be performed on various form fields such as name, email, password, date, mobile numbers, etc. 2. It is typically done on the client side using JavaScript, which provides faster feedback to the user compared to server-side validation. 3 common validation tasks include checking if required fields are filled, validating email format, ensuring passwords meet complexity requirements, and restricting numeric fields to only accept digit. 4. JavaScript allows more sophisticated validation logic beyond what HTML attributes offer, such as using regular expressions to validate email format. 5. Event listeners can be attached to form elements to handle validation dynamically. For example, listening for the submit event and preventing form submission if validation fails. 6. If validation fails, JavaScript can display custom error messages and highlight the problematic fields to guide the user in correcting their input. 7. Once validation passes, the form can be submitted either by calling form.submit or allowing the default form submission process to proceed. 8. It's important to still perform server-side validation to handle any potential issues that may arise from disabled JavaScript or browser manipulation. In summary, JavaScript form validation is a powerful tool for ensuring data quality and improving user experience by providing immediate feedback on invalid inputs and guiding users to correct their entries before form submission. DHTML, combining HTML, CSS and JavaScript. DHTML, Dynamic HTML, is a combination of technologies that allows web pages to be more interactive and dynamic. It combines HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and the document object model, DOM, to create customizable and responsive content. Key components of DHTML include HTML. HTML provides the structure and content of web pages. CSS. CSS is used for styling the appearance and layout of HTML elements. JavaScript. JavaScript is a client-side scripting language that enables dynamic behavior. It is used to access, control and manipulate HTML elements. DOM, the document object model, DOM, is a standard interface for programming HTML. DOM defines the objects and properties of all elements in an HTML document, allowing them to be accessed and modified by JavaScript. Some key features and uses of DHTML include changing the content, style and attributes of HTML elements dynamically, creating interactive effects and animations, validating user inputs, handling events like clicks and mouse movements, binding data to HTML elements. DHTML allows web pages to be more responsive and customized to user interactions without the need to reload the entire page. It provides a more engaging and dynamic user experience compared to traditional static HTML pages. Here's an example of DHTML, Dynamic HTML, code that combines HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create an interactive web page. Example of DHTML, Dynamic HTML, code that combines HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In this example, HTML is used to create the structure of the web page, including a div element with an ID of myDiv. CSS is used to style the div element, setting its width, height, background color, and position to absolute. JavaScript is used to define two functions, change color and revert color. These functions change the background color of the div element when the mouse hovers over it and reverts the color when the mouse moves out. Additional JavaScript functions moveDiv_right and moveDiv_left are used to move the div element to the right and left, respectively, using the setInterval method to create a continuous animation. When one opens this HTML file in a web browser, one will see a blue square that changes color when one hovers over it and moves back and forth continuously. This example demonstrates how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript can be combined to create dynamic and interactive web pages. Here is an example of DHTML, dynamic HTML, code that combines HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create an interactive web page. Output: when one loads this HTML file in a web browser, one will see a blue square with the text "Hover over me." When one hover mouse over the square, it will turn red. When one move mouse away, it will turn blue again. Here's how the code works. HTML. The div element with the ID myDiv represents the blue square. The onMouseOver and onMouseOut attributes call JavaScript functions when the user hovers over or moves away from the square. CSS. The CSS styles define the size, color, and position of the blue square. JavaScript. The change color function is called when the user hovers over the square. It changes the background color of the square to red using document.getElementBead myDiv.style.backgroundColor. The changeBack function is called when the user moves the mouse away from the square. It changes the background color back to blue. This example demonstrates how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript can be combined to create dynamic and interactive web pages. The JavaScript functions manipulate the HTML elements and CSS styles to change the appearance of the page based on user interactions. Events in JavaScript. JavaScript events. JavaScript events are actions or occurrences that happen in the browser, which can be triggered by various user interactions or by the browser itself. JavaScript supports a variety of events that can be triggered by user actions, browser actions, or changes in the state of the environment. Event types. Mouse events. On mouseover, the user moves the mouse over an HTML element. On mouseout, the user moves the mouse away from an HTML element. On click, the user clicks an HTML element. On double-click, the user double-clicks an HTML element. On mouse down, the user presses a mouse button over an HTML element. On mouse up, the user releases a mouse button over an HTML element. On mouse move, the user moves the mouse while it is over an HTML element. On mouse out, the user moves the mouse away from an HTML element. Keyboard events. On key down, the user presses a keyboard key. On key press, the user presses a key and releases it. One key up, the user releases a keyboard key. Form events. Ochange, a HTML element has been changed. On input, the user is typing in an input field. On submit, the user submits a form. On reset, the user resets a form. Window document events. On load, the browser has finished loading the page. On before load, the user is about to leave the page. On unload, the user has left the page. Focus events. On focus, an element gains focus. On blur, an element loses focus. Other events. On error, an error occurs in the script. On load, the browser has finished loading the page. On resize, the browser window is resized. On scroll, the user scrolls an element. These events can be handled using JavaScript to execute code when they occur, allowing for dynamic interactions and responses to user actions and changes in the environment. Here are some key examples. Click events example. Here's an example of on-click event, which fires when the user clicks on an element. Event handling in JavaScript. Events are actions or occurrences that happen in your web page or application, and JavaScript allows you to respond to these events. Handling a click event. In this example, one get a reference to the button element using document.get element beat. The use of a event listener method to attach a click event listener to the button. When the button is clicked, the provided function will be executed, and the message button was clicked will be logged to the console. In this example, one get a reference to the input field and add a key down event listener to it. Whenever a key is pressed while the input field is focused, the provided function will be executed and the pressed key will be logged to the console. Event objects. An event occurs. The event listener function receives an event object as a parameter. This object contains information about the event, such as the type of event, the target element, and any additional data related to the event. Here's an example of accessing properties of the event object. In this example, one accesses the key, type, and target properties of the event object to log more information about the event. Event propagation. Event propagation is the order in which events are received on the page. There are two main phases of event propagation. 1. Capturing phase. The event starts at the window, then travels down through the DOM tree to the target element. 2. Bubbling phase. The event bubbles back up through the DOM tree from the target element to the window. By default, event listeners are added in the bubbling phase. But one can specify the capturing phase by setting the third parameter of adevent listener to true. In this example, the capturing phase message will be logged first, followed by the bubbling phase message. Overall, JavaScript events allow one to create interactive web applications by reacting to user actions and browser state changes. Understanding how to work with events is a fundamental part of JavaScript programming. Buttons in JavaScript. Creating buttons in JavaScript. There are two main ways to create buttons in JavaScript. 1. Using HTML button element. One can create a button directly in your HTML using the button tag. Example of creating button in HTML with button tag. 2. Dynamically creating a button with JavaScript. One can also create a button dynamically using JavaScript. Here's an example of dynamically creating a button. Adding functionality to buttons. To make a button do something when clicked, one need to attach an event listener to it. The most common way is to use the onClick event. Example of adding onClick event functionality. One can also use the addEventListener method in JavaScript. Example of adding addEventListener method. This will call the myFunction function whenever the button is clicked. Accessing button properties. One can access various properties of a button using JavaScript, such as button.disabled gets or sets whether the button is disabled. Button.form returns the form that the button belongs to. Button.name gets or sets the name of the button. Button.type gets or sets the type of the button, example, button, submit, reset. Button.value gets or sets the value of the button. For example, example of accessing button properties. Types of buttons in JavaScript. In JavaScript, there are primarily three types of buttons. 1. Submit buttons. Buttons with type is equal to submit are used to submit a form to the server. When clicked, these buttons will send the form data to the server. 2. Reset buttons. Buttons with type is equal to reset are used to reset the form to its initial state. When clicked, these buttons will clear all the form fields. 3. Standard buttons. Buttons with type is equal to button are standard clickable buttons that can be used to trigger JavaScript functions. These buttons do not submit or reset the form by default. Additionally, the HTML button element provides more flexibility than the input type is equal to button element, as the button can contain text, images, and other HTML elements. Buttons can also be styled using CSS classes provided by CSS frameworks like Bootstrap. Some common button styles include .btn primary, .btn success, .btn danger for contextual styling, .btnlg, .btn assign for different sizes. .btn block for full-width buttons. .active and .disabled for button states. JavaScript can also be used to programmatically control button behavior, such as toggling the button state, enabling the button, or changing the button text. The three main types of buttons in JavaScript are submit, reset, and standard buttons, with the button element providing more flexibility than the input element for button customization. Events and buttons. JavaScript events are actions or occurrences that happen in the browser, often triggered by user interactions like mouse clicks or keyboard presses. When JavaScript is used in HTML pages, it can react to these events and execute code in response. Here are some key points about JavaScript events and buttons. Common events for buttons. Some of the most common events for buttons include onClick, triggered when a button is clicked. OnMouseOver, fired when the mouse pointer moves over a button. OnMouseOut occurs when the mouse pointer leaves a button. OnFocus occurs when a button gets focus. OnBlur, fired when a button loses focus. Assigning event handlers. There are a few ways to assign event handlers to buttons in JavaScript. 1. Using HTML event attributes. Example of using HTML event attributes. 2. Assigning event handlers in JavaScript. Example of assigning event handlers in JavaScript. 3. Using addEventListener. Example of using addEventListener function. Using addEventListener is the recommended modern approach, as it provides more flexibility and avoids mixing JavaScript with HTML. Example: changing background color on button click. Here's an example of using a button's click event to change the background color of the page. When the button is clicked, the change background function is called, which generates a random RGB color and sets it as the background color of the page body. In summary, JavaScript events allow you to add interactivity to your web pages, and buttons are a common element that can trigger these events, enabling you to execute code in response to user interactions. Controlling your browser. There are several ways to control your web browser. Browser control settings. You can configure various browser control settings in the browser control node of application control, such as URL redirection, web installations, example, allowing signed ActiveX controls from specific domains, importing snippets, adding elevated websites. These settings take effect after closing and reopening the browser. Controlling browsers programmatically. You can control web browsers programmatically using tools like Selenium with Python. This allows you to automate tasks like sending GET requests to URLs, identifying HTML elements like input fields and buttons, entering text and clicking buttons, extracting data from web pages, executing JavaScript code on pages. For example, you can automate the login process on a website and scrape data from the user's profile page. Closing and exiting browsers. To close and exit a web browser like Netscape, you can select File Exit from the toolbar menu. It will prompt you to confirm closing all windows and exiting the browser. In summary, you can control browsers through built-in settings, programmatic automation using tools like Selenium, and simply closing and exiting the browser. The appropriate method depends on your specific use case and requirements. JavaScript can be used to control certain aspects of the web browser, but it is limited by security restrictions. Here are the key points. JavaScript can access and manipulate the browser object model, BOM, which includes objects like window, screen, location, history, and navigator. This allows JavaScript to perform actions like opening, closing windows, resizing, scrolling, and detecting browser properties. However, JavaScript running in a web page is sandboxed and cannot directly access the user's local files, programs, or operating system. This is a security measure to prevent malicious code from compromising the user's machine. To control external programs or the local system, JavaScript would need elevated privileges, which is not allowed in web browsers for security reasons. Attempting this would be considered a security vulnerability. Some limited control may be possible through browser extensions add-ins written in JavaScript, but this requires the user to install the extension. Extensions have more access than regular web pages. In summary, JavaScript can control the browser itself to some degree, but cannot directly control the user's computer, programs, or files due to security restrictions. Attempting to bypass these restrictions would be considered a security flaw. At last, here are some brief description of this web technology course. This subject, web technology, provides students with the basic idea about what are web pages and how they can be created using simple codes. It provides an insight about the process of creation of websites and hosting of the website on the internet. Along with that, students will also learn about the basic protocols involved in internet technology. Prerequisites and/or notes. 1. Basic computer knowledge. 2. Interest in computers. Course objectives. Knowledge acquired. 1. Knowledge about HTML and web page creation. 2. Basic knowledge of server-side scripting. 3. Knowledge about web application development procedures. 4. Familiarity with various concepts of application development using HTML and JavaScript. Competency developed. 1. Proficiency in web page development and website management. 2. Ability to create dynamic web interface. 3. Ability to write server and client-side scripts and manage websites. 4. Ability to design a web page using image, audio and video editing tools. 5. Ability to understand the basic concepts of open source standards and open source software. Dear viewers, if you feel this video little bit informative and helpful, then please subscribe and like the channel. because your like and subscribe will motivate the creator to create more such informative videos. Thank you.